We want to help you be the very best missionary so that you can give your very best to the people you're serving. What makes this podcast unique is it's done by missionaries for missionaries. How can we take timeless principles and apply them to our lives as missionaries? That's really our heart behind this. Well, thanks for joining us for today's episode of Modern Day Missionaries. Today we have with us Tim Hurd from Church of the Highlands. And Tim, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, honor to be with you today. Excited about this.
So am I. You know, Tim, I know Danny and I met you for the first time when you came down to Peru leading a team from Church of the Highlands. And we just hit it off right away and just love your heart for missions, love your heart for church.
Yeah, I that was one of my favorite trips I've been on, and then meeting you guys, and then actually getting to know you a little bit better on the other side. And when your daughter's now at Highlands College, and so it's been a joy, and I love what I get to do every day. I have to turn it off, I know, but I could do it 24/7 if I needed to. Easy.
Well, and you can tell that you love what you do, and that makes a big difference. I know when Danny and I got to stay with you and Karen when we were up last, we had just such a fun time talking. We were talking about this podcast, and in that conversation, we realized you needed to come on here today. Because Tim, what you do is you are on staff at Church of the Highlands, and you work there with outreach, with global missions, with legacy partnerships. And then I got to find out this last time your background as an entrepreneur. And was just fascinated. And you teach over there at the college as well. And I love the way that you invest in missions with your heart, and then you invest in connecting business leaders with what's going on globally as well. And so that's what we wanted to dig into today, was really that the area of partnerships with churches. I know in talking to a lot of missionaries, they want to know, how can we connect well with churches, in particular large churches, because Church of the Highlands, for those who don't know, is an extremely large church. Like, what would the current attendance be?
I'm not sure what the 5-week average is, but by the end of February, I think will be 26 campuses. So in Georgia and mostly in Alabama. So that's a lot of people. That's a lot of logistics. That's a lot of just, that's a lot of everything.
It is. And you also work with business leaders, a lot of leaders of organizations. And as missionaries, sometimes we can figure out how to connect with people we're already in relationship with, or maybe a pastor of a smaller church where those pastors are more accessible. But today we're going to really dig into how to connect with and how to communicate with pastors of perhaps larger churches or business leaders who are not as accessible. It might have different kinds of expectations in terms of how we communicate with them.
Absolutely. It's a challenge. And I feel like a lot of times what I end up doing is helping people understand us for the majority of a first meeting. And then, okay, now let's move on to the next step. Okay. Are you sitting with the right person? Am I the right guy? Or you really need to be talking to the local guy and this other guy. So it's a lot of that. And I spend I've had several guys who sit in the development seat for an organization. What do I need to do? I was like, you need to take a year and get to know all these people. Just take a year. Like, don't ask them for any money. Just share vision when you get the opportunity, but really build a relationship with these guys. And that takes time.
And so starting with relationship with men and women who are in these kind of positions, and what would you even say if someone's looking to get in relationship with someone like that? How do they even connect with someone who is a leader on a larger scale?
I really think take your time, is a big thing for me. Don't think you're going to figure it out on the first shot, especially in a big organization. So you almost have to do what I, try to do is a lot of digital research on the front end. Like, who are they? What, how big are they? Okay, now we're at, okay, they're this big, this is their pastor. How do I, and look at them from almost a, almost a 20,000 foot view. What do we look like from the internet? and then go, okay, now how do I, talk to whoever? Do I connect to, Stephanie and Danny and say, hey, do y'all know somebody at Church of the Highlands? And y'all go, hey, let's start with Tim or start with whoever. And I think that is such a critical piece that a lot of people, I mean, I've sat down in the room where, again, I end up doing so much education trying to get them to understand the grasp of what we're doing and how many people and all these things that you can do a lot of that on the front end. Hey, man, y'all are huge. Y'all have a college, y'all have all these things. And it can be a little overwhelming from, I think, a missionary standpoint of like, oh my gosh, like, how do I even get in with these guys? And at the same point, if you're building a relationship, you're not really getting in. You're just, hey, Tim's a friend. You know, we would do stuff without, any kind of transaction. So I think that's a big piece that often gets missed. And it's critical because it's hard to get to the guy, because, Pastor Chris is an amazing pastor and,
Mhm.
and he loves missions, like loves missions. But he's charged me and Pastor Dino with, running missions. So how do you, with me as a Pastor Dino, you have to figure out those little logistics out, which just takes time. So,
That's true, and in terms of somebody in an organization, it's figuring out who does what, who is the right person to talk to, where do I even begin?
100%. Where do you begin? And then once you figure out how to communicate with whoever the person is, I think that becomes, a big breakthrough with, okay, you're just building that relationship with that person. And there's never to ask. If I'm asking you, I think people have done it right. Hey, how can I help you? What do you need? If we get to that spot after however long, then I think we've done it. It's been done right.
Okay, so within that relationship, it sounds like it's identifying the right people. And then to kind of sum up what you've just been saying, it sounds like learn your leader, learn who that person is, learn what is their preferred method of communication. Learn, do they like detailed spreadsheets? Do they like
Right.
super short texts? Because I suppose each leader is going to want something a little bit different from you.
Oh, no, 100%. Like, I mean, everybody's different, and some people are, some guys love to send pictures. I love to get pictures, but I don't want 40 of them. You know, like just send me a
Right.
couple. That's great. Uh, and then I think there's a piece in there that okay, helping people who are asking or telling or trying to develop a relationship. Where is Church of the Highlands? Like, what is the grand scheme of how we think about mission, how we think about missions? Or I think you and I maybe discussed the kind of the scale that I have of, where churches are if you had a missional scale as far as global missions go, where are you on that scale? What's your values? What are your visions?
Only researching the person, but researching the vision of the organization, or if it is a person, the vision of that person, and making
Yeah.
sure that what you've got aligns with what they're after with their heart as well.
Oh, 100%. Because again, Pastor Chris has charged me and Pastor D, with really carrying his vision. And so I'm just a vision carrier for Pastor
Yeah.
Chris. And I'm like, I know the values he has. I know what he wants to do. I know where he wants to do it. And I'm carrying that out to the best of my ability. And that's through other people like you guys and all these other missionaries and organizations that we work with. There's people who we don't really work with all the time, and because it's not a great fit. And I try to be very honest that is, hey, this is just not a great fit for us right now. And there's never I don't ever like to say a hard no because, as vision and values sometimes can change. And so I said, hey, just right now, it's just not a fit, but you're an amazing person. I like to get to know people and it's good to know people because at the end of the day, I think sometimes I'm going to run into more people than a missionary is,
Mhm.
because those guys, like, those are the heroes and they are on the ground doing the work. And a lot of times they're doing so much, they don't know there's other guys that may be able to help them. But all those guys are coming to me a lot of times, and I'm like, I'm able to connect dots for a lot of
Yeah.
folks. Uh, and so I think that's another value to just building that relationship.
Yes. Okay, so we're looking at what we're doing to seeing if it aligns with the vision of the person or the organization. And then we're also looking for a way, I think you're saying too, to communicate that in a way that they understand. And this is not spin. This isn't taking what we're doing and trying to make it sound like it's what they're doing. No, it's
100%.
looking at what it is that we're doing and saying, hey, is there a piece of what I'm doing, or maybe even all of what I'm doing that fits with this leader or this organization? And how can I emphasize those pieces? How can I
Absolutely.
show that our vision aligns? And so that's really it is good communication. It's thinking through the words that we choose, the stories that we tell, the images that we share, because sometimes we might have the same vision as a leader, but because we have poor communication skills, we aren't communicating that. And how sad is that? That we actually have the right vision, but we're not hitting the right notes. And that's where it is that blend, like you're saying, of
Yeah.
figuring out what it is that we're doing, how that aligns, learning our leader,
Right.
learning that person, and figuring out how can I communicate this effectively with them so that they can catch the passion that I have for this particular area in which I'm serving.
100%. Like that's huge. And what you mentioned it right there is like sometimes we don't have the skills to communicate the what we're trying to accomplish. I don't ever want to dictate, change a report for us, but being able to communicate it verbally is one thing. It's one thing to write it down and say, hey, this is leadership development and church planning. And then
Yeah.
somebody calls it, hey, we do 10 schools, and like, well, that's you're developing leaders if you're doing any kind of school anywhere. So that's even helping them understand like, hey, this is what the category that would fall in for us, which helps them with their communication.
You're
So,
bringing up a valuable point there, Tim, that some people might be doing the right thing, but not know how to communicate it. And so, my question there for you is for missionaries who are listening, who maybe don't feel like they have the greatest communication skills, maybe they don't have a great business acumen, or they don't feel like they have the right language to be able to express themselves in a way that would connect well with a business leader. What are some things they could do to refine their communication?
I would spend some time like figuring out a reporting system, because business people, I would say by and large, they're going to connect with a story. They're going to connect with a person, and they do love that. Like I was a business leader. I would like to do business with people I liked. At the
Mm.
same time, I'm also was looking for some sort of metric to measure. And I'm not talking like I need to know your return, like my return on investment, even though there, that's a thing to think about. I don't want to judge fruit at all. At the same time, I want to see, okay, we were financially accountable. We did this is what we did. Like, so there's some data points. I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day. Like, we don't let the data drive what we do, but we use it to help us make better decisions to pastor people.
Yeah.
And I love data. Like I could, you send me a spreadsheet and a graph, and this is what we did, and this is how many people we touched and reached and fed or whatever. And then you balance that with a financial statement. Then you're like, oh wow, okay, wait a minute, you got all that done for, you know, $50,000. Wow, that's pretty amazing. And I think that speaks volume. And simpler is usually better for business people too.
Okay.
Uh, I think that's a, I mean, a 1 page, a 2 page document is about what it's about what I want to read, and it's about what most people want to read. I think, I read through all kinds of proposals and plans, and I usually say, hey, if you put these like 5 stats in the front, like I'm sold. I'm with you. But it helps me go, okay, this is this, kind of like this is the state of the situation. And when you're working all around the world, there's so many communities and the world is so huge. To package what you're doing in a way that lets me wrap my head around it is is the best thing I think, missionaries or even organizations can do for people.
Absolutely. And I think that each one of us knows at least one business person. I mean, whether it's a cousin or a parent or a brother or a friend, everybody
Yeah.
knows somebody who is some type of business leader, even if it's a small business. And to your point, really maybe taking a report, putting it together, and presenting it to one or two people and saying, hey, pretend you don't know me. If I was giving this to you as a proposal, what's missing? What stands out to you? Which one of these statistics or stories or photos is grabbing your attention? It takes more effort and more work, but when we're looking to make a larger connection like this, utilizing the connections that already exist in our lives.
As you were talking, I'm thinking through like all the presentations that I see or I look at, and I remember the ones that are short, that are quick, that are impactful, and that are presented with vision instead of need. I think that's a critical piece in all of it,
Mm,
is to lead any presentation, any kind of ask, just lead with vision. As people will give to vision. I have a personal saying, I'll give you $100 for your need. I'll give you, $1,000 for your vision, because it, people follow vision, people give to vision. I mean, everybody will be moved by need, but they're usually going to give what's left over in their wallet, you know, to help somebody who's in need versus, hey, I'm following where, Danny and Stephanie are going. I see where they want to do. Oh, well, I'd love to fund and help you make up that gap. I'd love to fund that piece of your vision. And if you learn that language, it makes a difference, especially with business people, because again, they're thinking on Pastor Lee likes to say business people and church people talk two different languages. Like, but it's one's talking Chinese and one talking Mandarin. They're both Chinese, but they're not the same. So you're using some language that is either churchy or, spiritual, where the business guy's, he's walking out of his board meeting and he's sitting down in front of, you got a missionary and going, hey, I still have my business brain on. You're awesome. I like connecting with you, but I still need to see something on paper that makes that, okay, I can jump behind that.
that
So
is a really interesting distinction between that church language and that business language. And interestingly, for a pastor of a larger church, or when you get into those larger churches, they are both in a sense because they're running a very large organization. And yet they're running a large church. So they love Jesus and they are using that kind of
right,
language. So in that case, it's maybe a fusion of those two. And again, that's where you
totally.
get to know your leader, you get to know your
Absolutely.
organization so that you're communicating in a way that's effective for them. And then you're making me think of Tim, as a missionary, I know we all have the instances in which there are years that those reports are just fun to write because we've got numbers and we've got stories, and
Right.
then there are the linears, like
Yeah.
even a
Yeah.
church leader or a business leader goes
Sure.
through. And that's where I think relationship can really sustain us, because if you're putting together a report and it just was not your best year, if
Right.
you've let the relationship lapse, and you have not cultivated that, then the person might look at the report and go, what's going on? But if they know you as a person and you say, hey, can we have a conversation about this?
Yeah.
Then
Uh,
there's relationship to carry you through those difficult points as well.
Absolutely, and I think that goes on to just the ongoing communication with people. Like, you know, uh, I think we were talking. It's a very fine balance of what's enough and what's too much, and
Say
because
more about that. What is a good balance, would you say?
well, I think that's where you just ask a lot of questions. Hey, can I? How do you want to receive a report? How do you want to receive an update? And, it's different for me. If we're funding something, I'm like, I gotta have it, on these 3 dates. And I try to reduce it because, like, I have to produce a report every month, and it is not my favorite thing to do. So, I try not to put a report on everybody else, but I do have to have a report. And so I'm like, "Hey, I need it on these dates, this date, and this date."
Mhm.
And those are my days. And then after that, if we're not funding, I'm like, hey, every 6 months, I'm cool with it, with a newsletter, an update, and then let's talk about when you're having a bad year. Like, hey, wasn't great. I mean, I have to have those conversations all the time of, hey, this is what's going on with the ministry, what's happening, what happened, or hey, why haven't I gotten a report? Or
Mhm.
is there a report? Or can we work on this report? Because I'm I see like trying to help whether it's a missionary or an organization get better. I said, if you can communicate this really quickly, and I think this would help me. And if it helps me, it's got to help, at least other people. Like I can't be the only person that's asking for a for a report. So,
Reports, bless them.
oh yeah,
Tim, another thought that just came to me as you were talking too is who knows what those leaders like to hear and how they like to hear it is their assistants. Their assistants and their people who work underneath them, they're not team members, but the people on their team. So
right.
if you can't get a face-to-face, right away with a leader, reach out to their assistant, become friends with them, get to know the
Oh,
people who work for them. They know, they'll be able to tell you how do they like to be
totally.
communicated with.
Totally. I mean, that's exactly it. Like if so there's so much community, only so many people I can talk to in a day. And if you talk to the girl who helps coordinate a lot of what I do, she, I let her, speak into it. Like, hey, she's like, hey, I talked to this person the other day on the phone, because, you were busy. I think you really need to talk to them. Or she knows obviously our vision, our church's vision, our pastor's vision enough to know, well, I don't think that's going to be a fit. So you'd be good to talk to them maybe on a phone call, but don't do a meeting, or hey, you need to go see this in person, or hey, I don't know if we need to travel there, so she's helping do a lot more things than, you know, send emails and make appointments, so
Oh, yeah, and a good assistant is a gatekeeper because 'cause they're protecting you from what they know you don't need to hear, and
right,
they're a filter, they're helping pass through what you do need to hear. So
right.
cultivating a relationship with someone who's close to the leader, again, not in a weird, manipulative, using someone
100%.
way. We're all working together for the kingdom of God.
Yeah. Right,
And
right.
that starts with relationships. So not a
Yes.
relationship just with the leader, but with the people surrounding the leader as well. Because
Yeah.
we all want to be the person. If I'm trying to get a hold of you, Tim, I want to be just besties with that
Yeah.
gal working for you. Cause she's like, you gotta talk to Stephanie.
Yeah.
She's got some good things that she wants to put on your radar.
100%.
I would love to know, uh, in terms of some of those things like generating reports and putting things together, do you have any practical resources that you would recommend to missionaries who are working on some of those reports and communication?
You know what? I think you actually mentioned what I think the best practical resource is to go sit down with a business person and, hey, what really makes sense to you? And then do that probably 4 or 5 times.
Mhm.
And so I think that's the one of the most practical things somebody can do, is to go and then go learn from other missionaries, other development guys. I think if missionaries also would go learn from like these groups that have a development guy, that his job is to go develop relationship and, essentially fundraise for the organization. Sit down with some of the best guys that do that, you know, and learn. So just I think those are two big practical takeaways that people could do and then try it, try to talk to missions leaders at different churches. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, hey, who do I need to talk to? Do I talk to Stephanie? Do I talk to Danny? Or is it somebody else? And
Yeah.
uh, so, yeah, I think you just go all those routes. Again, I think that there was a piece I wrote down that we didn't talk about is I think being networked is such a critical takeaway for missionaries.
Yes.
And it's not natural it's not a natural person for for an entrepreneur, which I think missionaries are the ultimate entrepreneur.
Mhm.
And I think if you that's a I would say I would add that as a good takeaway just to go work on the network of people I know, both where I work or operate or however you say that, and back in the States. Okay. So who do Stephanie and Danny know that I need to know? I mean, and I mean, I tell people when I'm stepped into this seat, I love the world and I love missions, but there was not a lot of people doing what I do. And again, back to the scale, especially at the scale. So the first thing I did was I went and found, you know, the 4 guys that do that, the, you know, biggest churches I could find, and that were doing similar to what I was doing. And I just started learning. Hey, how do you do this? How do you do this? What's your philosophy? Like, so I did all these things that I'm talking about, but I just did it at what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And it's paid off because now there's 5 or 6 of us who are on a text thread, and we're all at different places on the, like what I call the church mission scale. Uh,
Yeah.
I get it. Like I totally, cause I was an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I would put my head down and I don't care what you're doing.
Okay, so I
So
like what you're saying. Don't put your head down, lift your head up because
right.
who we're connected with says something about us to the
A
people who
hundred
want to
percent.
invest in us.
A hundred
So
percent.
as a pastor at a church, you're noticing who else are you connected with in your city? Are you running alone? Are you isolated? Are you living
Mm-mm.
in a bubble and the only people you know are the people that you're directly
Wow.
serving or maybe one other set of missionaries? Or are you getting to actively know people in your area, other ministers, other churches? And then also, who do you know back in the States? Because you're right, Tim. That's a really good point. It's an interesting thing when someone says, "Oh, you know so and so?" Or, "Hey, I
Yeah.
know so and so." When I say I know a person, that tells you something about me.
Yes.
Oh, okay, there's a connection there. And it does do a little light bulb moment, I think, for the person we're talking about. And as missionaries, we better be able to build relationships and network. We're
Yeah.
literally there to serve people, to win people for Christ.
Right.
So if we're
Right.
isolating out and introverting out in our own little bubbles, I'm sorry, that's a scary thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are we doing then? What are we
Yeah.
doing then?
It's super scary. Yeah.
So networking in our passport country where we're from, networking globally, networking in our country, and that can sound exhausting to people, but it's not as complicated, I think, as we make it think. Because when you know somebody, somebody knows somebody else.
It kind of shows that whole where all
Yeah.
the circles meet, and it helps me make decisions, and oh wait a minute, there's because then there's more accountability than me. Yeah,
Mhm.
like that's a whole nother conversation really, because now my friend, from here, "Hey, were you there? What did you think? How'd you think? What do you think about" so he's giving me a report, so now he's saving me a trip, I
Okay,
trust
that's a good
him.
point. People are talking about us behind our back, and we wanna make sure that they're saying good things. Like, "Have you met those guys over there?"
Hey, or have you met that guy? That guy is crushing it, like, so that's the, again, that's the conversation that I like to be a part of. It's like, man, it looks like he's crushing it for me through text message and all he's sharing with me, but you've been there and he's like, man, that guy's crushing it. It's way bigger. It's way bigger than what they're reporting. It, hey, man, like that goes back to the reporting piece. People underreport.
Yeah.
People rarely overreport. I have discovered that.
Mhm.
They usually are, so humble and hey, this is what we're doing. They don't because they don't want to overinflate or over. And then I've gotten on the ground with people going, "Whoa, wait a minute. You're undershooting what's happening here."
So
You
if we're
know,
gonna default to over communication rather than under communication.
yeah, and really work that report piece. Like, hey, you're telling me you're doing this thing, and I see you're doing 5 things. So why, like, tell me everything you're doing, not just the one thing you.
Okay, Tim, that's a good point too, because sometimes as missionaries, for some people, it very naturally comes easy identifying what it is they're doing. I remember earlier on, people would sometimes ask me, "What do you do?" And I could really tell them what my husband was doing. I mean, I could tell them all the things he was doing, and they would say, "What are you doing?" And I would almost stall out, and I would think of one thing, and Danny would look at me and just laugh. He would answer for me. "She's doing this and this and this and this," and I would forget all of the things that I was doing. I think sometimes when we have a conversation, even with a fellow person on our team or another missionary, I would say, help me see what it is that I'm doing. Help me figure out how to explain what it is." Because often we are doing a lot more than we are aware of. So thinking that through as
100%.
well.
Well, yeah, I mean, because you need to report on those things. And then, like, I sit down twice a year with a girl who helps me. And I'm like, these are
Mhm.
all the things I have, on my plate or put my hands in that I'm, you know, these are all the, the things that we as a team touch
Yeah.
that are a project, that are a responsibility, whatever those things are.
Yes.
I mean, I just evaluate it. Like, we had a meeting yesterday and I said, next week we're going to sit down and we're going to throw on a big giant whiteboard all the things that we are involved in that are
Mhm.
that we're touching, because then I can put some things down, or okay, that can go to the back burner. We can prioritize. You can go,
Mhm.
okay, as a missionary, you can go like, man, we were doing a lot of activity, but there wasn't a lot of outcome.
Mhm.
And I mean, I know that's always a conversation, is outcomes versus outputs.
Yeah.
And so how, we have that conversation here all the time with our own stuff. Like, are we just
Right.
doing a lot of stuff, or are we actually, moving the ball down the field? And again, I know there are places on the earth that are super hard, and it's not always going to be a lot of outcomes. I That's where, like, missionaries have to trust whoever they're talking to on the leadership level to understand
Relationship.
that, again, back to the relationship. Hey, do you
Yeah.
understand yeah, I understand how difficult it is in a lot of the parts of the world. And
Mhm.
so I don't expect, you know, a
Yeah.
thousand baptisms and this
Mm.
and that and all the other numbers. I just expect you to be, fruitful, and that doesn't always resort in a number.
Going back to something you said just a moment ago, we've been talking a lot about reports and written communication, but there is that verbal piece as well. And it is really important that we are able to say what it is that we're doing. For me, I couldn't use that as an excuse. Literally took out my notes app on my phone, and I plugged in the things that we were doing, the things that I was doing, the things that Danny was doing, so that when I was going to talk to somebody, I knew, so that I didn't blank out or space out, because sometimes you have one opportunity to really present your vision well. And if you have a space out moment, which sometimes we do, some of us are
Oh,
just
sure.
faster on our feet than others. It's just the reality of what is. If you've got it listed out and you are keeping yourself aware of that, you're maybe looking at that before you hit into a meeting. Then when someone asks you, they aren't saying, "What are you doing?" And you're like, uh, I'm you don't wanna do that,
Right.
especially with a business leader or somebody who's leader of an organization. You wanna know what you're doing. You wanna have kind of that elevator speech. You wanna be able to express it with passion. So, you're putting together reports, but you're also practicing how you're gonna say it in a succinct way
Right.
as well. And those,
Yeah.
again, you can practice with business leaders, you can practice with fellow missionaries. Practice on people. Practice
Yeah.
on people.
Absolutely.
With
Absolutely.
reports, I wanted to mention, I know some people are probably getting overwhelmed, like, how do we even start with something like that? And we've talked a lot about emails, I know, here on the podcast, but there is something called Canva for people
Hmm.
who are wanting to create something really nice and visual, and they
Yeah.
have a free account where you can go in and create reports in there. There are
Yeah.
Google Docs that you can save as PDFs. So never use it as an excuse like, I can't do that. That's overly complicated. There are so many resources out there that are designed to make things like this simple. Or ask a business friend, what is it that you do?
Yeah.
Or ask a friend who's really administrative and who can create reports and say, could you help me create a template
Oh,
and figure out how to do this? There are people who maybe want to support missionaries, but they don't have the finances to do it, but they've got some time on their hands and they would love to help you put together a report.
oh,
So there's
yeah.
no excuse to not being able to do this and do this well.
Yeah. Those people they're not really super hard to find. Uh,
No, we've all
eh,
got business people, we've all got
yeah.
administrative
Yeah.
people, we've all
Yeah.
got good communicators. And if we don't, we get to do the awesome networking work of finding them and connecting with them.
Yeah.
So
For
we
sure.
can do it. Well,
Yeah.
Tim, I can't thank you enough for coming on today and sharing some of these ideas. I'm just picturing people listening and having jotted down ideas and things they might want to try, things they might want to do. So I'm just really hoping and
Yeah.
believing that this will help produce some fruitful relationship with larger churches or organizations or
Yeah.
business leaders for people going forward. So
Amen.
thank you again for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. It was an honor to do it.
Yes, yes. And for all of you who are tuned in today listening, thank you for joining us. Make sure to hit subscribe, leave us a review. We have these on YouTube as well. So you can check out our YouTube channel if you want to see these
Cool.
not live and in person, but in person. And make sure to share
Yeah.
it. If you have any questions, send those to care@modernday.org. And we will see you on our next episode.